50-50 O'Brien by L. Ron Hubbard. The merry-go-round wheezed and banged soulfully, and the cymbals clanged, and the horns blazed away, and the horses went up and down, and the kids shouted. People shouted, people laughed, and above it and through it went the yap, yap, yap of 22 rifles, hammering away with gusto at the mechanical ducks, which swam and dived and swam on their endless chain. Water geysered, bells clanged, lead whacked. And behind the cartridge-covered counter stood a young man. He was yelling to be heard above the racket, above the clang, above the showering tinkle of empties.
Come on, step right up and win a cigar, win a cigar, win a baby doll, 2 bits for 15 shots. Here's your chance, here's your chance. Anybody can do it right this way. Step right up.
Over and over, crack, 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 clang, clang, and the ducks and rabbits jumped up and went down over and over again. From the next booth, the seller leaned out and yelled,
"Hey, Win, here you're leaving us."
Yeah, gonna join the Marines.
What's the matter? Don't you like it?
Want to see some excitement for a change, that's all.
Crack, 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 and the pungent smell of smokeless powder and dust, and the buzz and clang and clatter of the crowd, the merry-go-round, the coaster dip, the people, the radios, and crack, crack, crack. Silence. Nothing moved. Brooding, festering jungle steamed unheard as it had for centuries. Vast, empty silence like a wall which roared and hurt your ears. Tense, festering jungle. Nothing else. For a long while, Winchester Remington Smith had been standing at the top of the trail staring down. His hat was faded, wavy from rain and sun, and his leggings were the color of Nicaragua. Somewhere ahead he had heard a sound. 10 minutes ago he had heard it, and he stood there waiting, ears smarting with silence. In his hat he carried a few sheets of onion skin paper, orders for Company K, and the paper had to get through. To push back that still wall which pressed in against him, he muttered,
The only difference between me and a telephone wire is that they patch a wire and they bury a runner.
Bitterness marred his voice. For 3 months he had been at it, carrying orders, stamping alone across mountains, down steep-sided, silent ravines. And he was under orders to avoid trouble, to get his messages through. Sometimes when he crept alone through the sullen night, he almost went mad with the desire to fire a clip at the silence. Anything to break the tension before the tension broke him. Perhaps this time, when he got back to Company K, the top man would let him stay around long enough to get himself back again. But Company K hardly knew him, and neither did 50-50 O'Brien, First Sergeant USMC. And if 50-50 O'Brien didn't even see him, then what chance did a fellow have in getting a break? 50-50 O'Brien. He'd like to know that man. 50-50 O'Brien was solid. He didn't let a thing like silence get him. 50-50 O'Brien was the toughest man in the regiment. Self-reliant, big-jawed, swashbuckling, with a killer's eyes, pale, icy eyes that stared straight through you. 50-50 O'Brien and his small black horse, the only black pony in the regiment, were always found in unexpected places. O'Brien had the idea that he himself could bring this guerrilla war to an end. A faraway click of a hoof, faint in all this stillness, came again to Win Smith's ears. Then he wanted to shout with relief. A black pony was coming toward him, and a black pony meant O'Brien. Maybe he'd have company during the last 10 miles. He started to call out a greeting, but the word clung in his throat, a sodden lump. O'Brien was not on the horse. The rider wore a straw hat and a ragged white shirt. A native on the black horse. Where was O'Brien? A creak of leather and a startled wheeze from the pony, the blur of a hand moving for a mountain gun. Win Smith dropped down and the shot screamed over his head. The rifle jolted his shoulders, shaking the jungle with its crash. The native jerked in the saddle, clawed at the horn, and came sliding out. The black horse, nostrils flared, charged up the trail toward Win Smith. He snatched at the bridle, caught it, and dragged the pony to a snorting stop. Very slowly, very watchfully, he went down the red clay path toward the sprawled lump of white. For an instant, he was afraid he had missed and killed the native, but the pale flicker of an eyelid gave him assurance. He knelt down and propped the native up against a tree trunk.
What's the idea? ¿Qué pasó?
Yankee!
¿De dónde viene el caballo? And where is the Yankee who rode it?
¿Quién sabe?
You know. And you're going to tell me about it. If you don't, I'll...
He felt in the pockets of his soggy shirt and found a box of matches. He struck one and looked at the native's feet. Then he knelt and began to remove a muddy leather boot.
No, no! I have heard what you do. I know you would torture me.
That's better,
said Smith, and put the matches back in his pocket.
Where is this Yankee?
We wounded him. He is now on his way to our camp.
What for?
He knows much. He is a great man. We would break him with certain means and obtain much knowledge. I went to bring other men.
Which trail?
1 kilometer back. The trail to the left, but they have gone far. You can do nothing.
Smith stood up and looked back along the path. The native was right. He could do nothing about it now. In fact, it would be better if he did nothing. His orders were to the point. He had to avoid any such trouble. The orders were more important than a single man. The best he could do would be to tell them at camp and let the patrol take care of it. But it was 10 miles to Company K, and in the meanwhile...
1 kilometer. I can see the tracks anyway. I can make sure...
50-50 O'Brien, the self-reliant, the swashbuckling O'Brien, caught like a rabbit in a snare. O'Brien was too swell a guy to leave in a spot like that.
1 kilometer?
He took out a cigarette, shoved it in the native's mouth, and lit it for him. Then, looking down into the puzzled brown eyes, he added,
They'll be finding you soon enough. You won't bleed to death.
He swung up on the black pony and went on down the dense tunnel. He wasn't listening to the nerve-twisting silence now. He had something else to think about. He found the trail, found the tracks. Several ponies had passed that way at a walk. He put a fresh clip in his Springfield and whipped up the black horse and left his own trail. An hour and a half later, he slowed the black pony's pace, and then, about 500 yards away, he caught sight of white dots moving along a ravine bottom. The trail there was long and straight, and from his position high above, Smith could command the entire length. He dismounted and spread himself out on top of a limestone boulder as though he was again on the firing line, winning his expert rating all over again. 7 white dots, he counted. One horse seemed to have no rider until he made out the khaki lump which was draped like a meal sack over the saddle. If that was O'Brien, the man might well be dead. He could almost hear the whir of the chain taking the ducks along their ledge. He could almost hear the crack, crack, crack of yapping 22s and the clang of the bells and the whistle and the thump of bullets. He grinned down the sights and squeezed carefully. A white duck pitched over on its side and out of sight. Another threw up its arms and toppled backward. The echo of the shots roared and pounded through the close canyon walls, and the reports were curiously hollow out in the open this way. The remaining white dots did not wait to look back. They loosened the horse they led and fled out of sight into the brush. The sack of meal hung listlessly from the saddle, arms dangling. Win Smith swung onto his horse and sent the animal plunging down the steep side and racing along the trail toward the released pony. It did not take him long to get there. He was scared by the listless waving of O'Brien's arms, by the small trickle of red which ran down out of the sleeve. Smith grabbed O'Brien's shoulder and shook it. O'Brien's eyes flickered for an instant and then opened wide.
Beat it. Beat it.
Hey, it's me, Win Smith. You're okay.
Beat it.
Delirious, decided Win Smith, and immediately swung up on the black horse and led the other pony away from there at a swift pace. Mountain guns began to roar and crack down the trail. Slugs spanged and howled away from rocks and trees. Win Smith grinned happily and remained tall in his saddle. The clatter of pans in the galley, the rattle of mess kits, the slamming of aluminum beaten to the off-key song about Lulu's baby filled the velvety darkness which had dropped over the camp of Company K. Clinging to the hillside by its tent pegs, Company K was busy finishing its supper in a bedlam which was sweet to Win Smith's silent, stung ears. Confident in the sentries, Win Smith could almost forget that still jungle and the men who scuttled like lizards through the brush.
Yeah, that was hot going, baby. I hear you popped off 3 of them,
said the corporal on Smith's left.
Nah, just 2. One rode off with the others.
Smith was not looking at the corporal's eyes. Smith was looking at the 2 stripes which graced the corporal's arm. He had just realized something. After that trick, O'Brien might promote him. Smith began to grin. He hadn't thought about it before, but if they made him a corporal, maybe he wouldn't have to listen to silence anymore. Those stripes were mighty nice looking, too.
He's got an idea,
said the corporal, speaking of O'Brien,
that the sooner we clean him up, the sooner we get out of this stinking mess. Now, maybe he's right, but you can't tell O'Brien nothing. Fool trick to go off by himself that way. Of course he got bunged up. He was damn lucky you saw his nag and followed him up.
A man in khaki with a small red cross on his sleeve slid into the circle and sat down on an empty ammunition case.
You Smith?
Yeah.
Thought you might like to know O'Brien is okay. You couldn't kill that tough egg. You know what he did? Tried to knock me down and leave the shack. Said he wasn't gonna have no messing over him. I used up a bottle of iodine on him for that crack. One in the shoulder, another in the leg. No broken bones. He's acting pretty mad about something.
Of course he is. You ever see a top kicker that wasn't mad about something? Gets himself picked off by the rebels and has to be rescued? Well, you expect him to be singing about it?
The corpsman looked long at Smith and then quietly went to work on his stew. 4 days later, Winchester Remington Smith was still in camp, a fact which set well with him. But on that fatal 4th day, at 10 o'clock in the morning, when he found himself facing the captain and the lieutenant and the patched-up O'Brien, he was very startled. O'Brien's ice eyes were fixed menacingly upon him. O'Brien's left hand dangled in a sling. O'Brien was using a crutch to stand, having refused the canvas chair. The captain, clean and hard of face, with a great show of unconcern, said,
I suppose this is a deck court, Smith, for conduct to the prejudice of good order and discipline.
Yes, sir,
said Smith, avoiding O'Brien's hard glance.
In a way, you have disobeyed your orders in carrying dispatches destined for Company K under orders to avoid any difficulties which might lead to the loss of those dispatches. Now, you deliberately set yourself out of your way to track down an uncertain lead, which, with a great deal of luck, brought you to O'Brien.
but what could I do, sir?
You should have come in, delivered your dispatches, and we could have sent out the patrol. Tracks do not fade that fast. For myself, well, I appreciate your feelings in the matter, but the sergeant here has, after all, discipline to maintain. Supposing we put this matter down in the book, Smith, and if, when we get outside, the sergeant still insists, we'll write it into your record. That will be all, Smith.
Yes, sir.
Said Smith, and saluted before he realized that he held his hat in his left hand. In great confusion, he about-faced and marched out of the tent. He did not stop walking until he had placed several trees between himself and the captain. Then he halted and looked out at the valley below, a stunned expression on his face. When he had been standing there several minutes, he heard the thump of a crutch coming up behind him.
Listen, you. You think you got away with it that time, but I'm sick of seeing a slacker around here. Get it?
Smith said nothing.
The second lieutenant's got some stuff that needs taken to a Guardia outfit over by Mount Pillow. Go get it.
Smith's face came alive.
Mount Palo? I thought you sent all that stuff back to command and had it dropped there by plane. No runner can get through to Palo.
Oh, so that's it. Now you're telling me how to run the company, huh? You think you're gonna go around shooting off that big face of yours just because you made a grandstand play, huh? I said there's some stuff from Mount Palo. Go get it, and fast. Or by God, I'll knock your face through the back of your head and kick your laces up around your neck. Beat it.
Smith looked at the sergeant's slung arm and the crutch, and then at the anger which leaped out of that set face.
What's the matter?
Plenty's the matter, damn you. You think you get maybe a stripe or two for pulling that stunt out on the trail, do you? You think maybe I'm supposed to overlook disobedience to orders, do you? Insubordination, that's what it is. Insubordination. You think by pulling what you did, you ought to have medals pinned on you. Maybe. Nice, shiny medals all over that stove-in chest of yours. Well, there aren't any medals in this outfit for the bird that disobeys his orders. What if you've been killed coming out of there, huh? I think you was just trying to get killed just for spite. And then what would have happened, huh? The natives would have taken those dispatches and we'd be in a hell of a shape, we would. You're a runner, not a goddamn Red Cross dog. And the quicker you get it, the better off you'll be. Trying to pull a hero stunt. What the hell do you think you're in? The girl reserves? Why, I've got a notion to bash in your grinning, ugly face for you, you mother-loving, baby-snatching, perverted son. Now get out of my sight. Get out of my sight. Get those papers and get the hell out of camp. I don't care if there are natives on that trail. I don't care if you have to wade and blankety-blank up to your neck. Get to Mount Palo and get back, and by God, if you get yourself bumped off, I'll knock a hole through you a cat could jump through. Now get out.
Smith's fists relaxed at his sides. Smith turned and went away. After all, you don't hit a wounded man, and you don't hit the O'Brien of the Corps. When he had received the orders and when he had filled his bandolier out of a broken ammunition case, he saw the corpsman looking at him from the front of the sick bay. The corpsman was smiling in a knowing way.
Where bound?
Mount Palo.
Whee! Been no runners over that way for weeks. Well, I wish you luck. I wish you luck.
Silence. A bush moved slowly against the wind. Far out across the bleached grass of the plain reared the head of Mount Palo. In 2 days he had traveled far, mostly by darkness, and the jungle trail had resounded with the hoofs of tired native mounts and with a subdued chatter of the natives moving restlessly through the mountains, bent on some errand Win Smith could not define. Many grimy shirts had passed through his ready sight, but he had held his fire. Something was doing here, and the sooner he reached Mount Palo, the better. There, at least, he could rest and eat in the company of the 2 Guardia officers. Assured that he alone moved through the heat, he raised up and started across the plain. A mountain gun cracked far to the right. A geyser of tan dust sprouted in the path before him. Win Smith changed his course, increased his pace, and headed doggedly for his goal. A second shot bullwhipped from the edge of the woods. Again, he changed his course. He whirled and threw himself down into the dust, twisting about and staring back, rifle propped on one elbow, finger tensing on the trigger. 2 horsemen were charging at him. Smith aimed carefully and squeezed. The first rider went down in a skidding swirl of dust. Smith fired again. The second threw up his arms. His mount whirled and plunged back toward the woods, dragging the bouncing body by the foot. Smith got up and faced Palo, breaking into a jog trot. He had the uncomfortable sensation of eyes staring at him from cover, and he knew that men had picked up his tracks. If they guessed that he was a courier, they would be waiting for him on the return trip. An hour later, drenched with muddy sweat, he came to a halt before a low tent pitched at the side of a rude, sunburned parade ground. A man in Marine uniform came out, a weary but immaculate man. Surprise flickered for a moment on his face.
Where the hell did you come from?
From Company K.
What the hell? They've been sending their stuff over by plane. Didn't you have trouble getting through?
A little. There seems to be something up.
Smith handed the slips of onion skin over to the Guardia captain. The captain loosed an oath which would have done credit to 50-50 O'Brien.
We're to fall back? What the hell?
Don't ask me. I'm just the messenger boy around here.
The Guardia captain looked at him for several seconds, observing the muddy, ripped condition of the clothes, noting the absence of a clip in the bandolier, seeing the red veins in the haggard eyes.
I meant that this is funny. They tell me the post is in danger and we're too far out. They tell me to fall back toward the post command. What the hell do they know about it? Sergeant Mallory and I don't have to depend upon guesses. We've got plenty of native boys here that know all the answers. It isn't this outfit that's in danger, damn it. It's Company K. And the fools had you come through all that just to give me a couple of screwy commands. What do they do down there? But if they say move back, my people move back, and that's that. But Pello, damn her hide, won't be easy to take again. See here, soldier, tell the cook to shovel you out some chow and then turn in for some snores. You'll go back with us, of course.
Win Smith looked at this gunnery sergeant of the Corps, this captain of the Guardia, and thought about another man like him. 50-50 O'Brien. The sensible thing to do would be to follow this Marine's advice, but a bull-tempered streak in Win Smith made him shake his head.
O'Brien told me to come back. They'll want to know the score. I'll rest up and leave it dark.
So O'Brien sent you out here, did he? Now tell me what you did to O'Brien.
Well, I guess I saved his life.
You saved his life and he sent you out here?
Yeah. You see, I shouldn't have taken the time to do it. I was carrying dispatch and I wasn't supposed to swing off my course.
Oh, bunk. That isn't the answer to it.
Then what is?
The Guardia captain scratched his head in a puzzled way and shrugged.
I don't know. O'Brien's a funny duck. Tough, but touchy. See here, soldier, I'm not going to let O'Brien get you bumped. You trail along with us. No use crossing back the way you came. You'd never make it.
O'Brien said to get back.
All right, all right. What do you do? Hypnotize you?
He motioned toward the galley and a crowd of dusky Guardia men.
Go get what chow and rest while you can. You'll need it.
Silence. A mud-splattered shadow crept up a slippery trail inch by inch, stopping and lying still at intervals. The moonlight lay hazily over the world, painting blue shadows under the rocks and trees. Far over to the right, a flicker of red indicated a bandit camp. For a day and almost 2 nights, Win Smith had dragged himself down the slopes and through the canyons toward Company K. But it was not this that he minded. It was not the length of the way. It was the silence, the ringing, never-breaking silence. A dogged stubbornness alone drove him on, a wish to show O'Brien that he could get through, that he could follow orders. But, he thought bitterly, little good that would do him. They'd forget this effort in a day. They'd forget it and send him out again into more silence. And they probably wouldn't even remove that farce deck court from the record. A hell of a life this was. How he ached for noise. How the hell did you get ahead in this outfit anyway? He'd done the thing he thought would be a cinch. You save a guy's life, so he sends you out and hopes you won't come back. Wasn't the bird human? Hadn't he ever heard of a thing called gratitude? 50-50, O'Brien. Humph. What had been eating him anyway? Win Smith went up the trail, groping in the blue whiteness of the night, hoping those natives would stick to their fire. Something moved between him and the moon, a blurry shadow coming down the steep trail. Smith petrified, and the native came on, slipping skillfully and quietly over the loose rocks. Smith braced his feet and moved the muzzle of his Springfield up, but he did not quite dare fire. That flicker of red was too close, and he was too weary to run far at any speed. 10 feet, 8 feet. He could see the man's eyes, his mouth, the shimmer of moonlight on his machete. 5 feet, 4 feet. Smith laid the gun aside and reached slowly out with his hands and gripped the bare ankles. The man screamed, snatching at the machete. Smith tried to throw his captive over his head into the ravine floor below. Smith reared up and the native jumped straight at him. They skidded out into space and struck the bottom. The native was underneath, lying still. A hot, salty stickiness ran out from under the hair. Smith fumbled all about him for his rifle. He could hear the calls along the ridge. He could hear the slap, slap, slap of bare feet over the path. A large rock offered ready protection from sniping above. He braced himself against the rough face and watched, breathing hard from his struggle and search. Men stopped against the sky, staring down. A man called,
Oi, ¿qué pasa?
Men muttered to one another for several seconds. Then,
Oi, Ramon, ¿dónde estás?
But Ramon was lying quietly in the wash, staring up at the moon, eyes flinty and wide open. Bare feet pattered briefly then.
Mira, mira, Yankees!
Winsmith leaned hard against the boulder, waiting. They had found his hat up there. Metal clinked and a creak and a snap told him of a gun being cocked. But still nothing happened. In a few moments, a light appeared at the top of the trail, a torch. It came through the air like a comet with its trail of sparks and landed in the middle of the wash, not 10 feet from Ramon, still burning. They could see the dead man in the glare, and they saw something else.
Solo!
It went up with a roar. Shadows danced along the crest. A rifle crashed, a ribboned line of sparks. The slug yowled out of the wash like a broken banjo string. Winsmith watched the flare of powder above him and thought about a row of gas candles which could be put out with the whisper of a bullet. You got a baby doll if you hit 15. 15. He began to put out the candles, moving along his boulder to keep them from pulling the same trick. The Springfield's jar was soothing to his weariness, its noise a balm to his silent, outraged ears. 1 candle, 2 candles, 3 candles, and they didn't light again. How many of the devils were there? That Guardia captain had been very, very right. These men were too close to Company K for a holiday. He wondered whether Company K knew it. A fist of lead slammed into his arm and sent white lightning ripping through his side. With a sense of relief, he saw that the limbs still responded to command. Men were arriving up there. Many, many men. Before long, they would find their way down, and it would be all over. What would O'Brien say? Smith saw a cave in the ravine side and was afraid that his eyes told him wrong. It was set flat under the cliff edge and was a perfect protection against bullets. He had to cross 20 yards of moonlight to get to it, but then so would the natives. He raised up and snuffed another candle and heard the rifle come clattering down. Then, bent over like a quarterback, he dived toward the natural fort. Stone splinters cut his ankles. A slug caught in his pack and almost threw him. He slid the last 10 feet, heels foremost, and pressed against the back of the cave. The firing on the cliff stopped. Voices racketed excitedly. Then there was silence. Now what? The natives hadn't forgotten him. They would be back. He began to be anxious about company. With so many natives so close, something was in the air. A sudden attack would be murderous, even if it wasn't fatal. Company K ought to know about it. Yep, he'd have to get through and tell them. Darkness was almost at hand. A rock rolled up on the ravine ledge. Something hard crunched before the cave entrance. Instinctively, Smith ducked. The world turned red and white. The blast was physical in its violence. Fragments spattered like bullets, whistling and screaming as they ricocheted from rock. Dazed and numb with shock, Smith pried himself away from the ground and stared out at the darkened wash. That had been one of those dynamite bombs. They were dropping them from overhead. They knew he'd try to get out in the dark. The sides of his neck felt wet. His body ached as though he had suffered from a beating with clubs. He heard the rolling of rocks after a moment. Men were charging across the open space. He chunked his rifle into his shoulder and began to shoot. The flare of the powder was like a torch. Men in white were coming on at a fast run. He sent a clip scattering into the magazine and fired as fast as he could work his bolt. Fired by instinct alone, expecting the downward slash of a machete every instant. The third clip showed a deserted front. 2 men were sprawled loosely on the rocks. A rifle ripped at him from across the stream, a horizontal streamer in the blackness reflected in the water, and they were coming again. He began to fire, but his shot struck rock not 15 feet in front of him. Shouts, shots, noise, and bedlam, but he felt more than he heard. The blood ran unheeded from his ears and shoulders. A torch soared, sputtering, and landed in a geyser of sparks just in front of the cave entrance. A bullet hit him in the ribs. He tried to shoot out the torch, but he could not see it. The world swam in a black murk. Once more the night exploded, sharper this time, and again. The torch blazed and flared, and lightning struck again. Win Smith slid silently forward across his rifle, cheek damply pressed to the cold stock. He was jolted time after time before he finally awoke, surprised to find that day had come. He was staring down at the trail and he was unable to move, but the jolting continued. Fascinated, he watched the legs of the horse not 2 feet away from his eyes. He was riding across a saddle, lashed into place. For a moment he wished that he had been killed back in the cave. Then it would all be over. But it only had to be done again. The natives had him. But no, he could see a horse in front of him. Just one horse, no more, and no horse behind him. The one in front was shiny black, and riding erect in the saddle he saw 50-50 O'Brien. He did not look back. He was intent upon forcing his pony to its best speed. From his shoulder dangled a bag lately filled with hand grenades. That was all Win Smith could see before the pain in his back pushed him into blackness again. Then he knew he was lying on a cot without knowing quite how he got there. The corpsman was putting away a hypo needle and stacking up gauze and a long roll of adhesive tape.
Hello.
Said the corpsman.
Want anything?
Hello. I got back, didn't I?
Yeah, thanks to O'Brien.
What happened?
Oh, we heard something that sounded like artillery, maybe dynamite bombs. And the guys were all for taking a look-see, but O'Brien got sore as hell when the rest wanted to trail along. And he pegged off alone with a bunch of grenades and an extra horse. He seemed to know all about it. And then he came back with you. That's all I know.
How am I?
Hell, you can't kill Marine. They're too dumb to die.
A rumble inquired from the doorway.
How is he?
Okay.
O'Brien came in looking somewhat tattered, but otherwise very happy.
How you feeling, kid?
Okay.
Look, you got a cut on your head top. You better let me fix it.
Nuts. Listen, kid, I thought you might want to know that I convinced the skipper that you're too valuable a man to let loose in those hills. I told him about the guys you knocked off, and he says maybe we can work you up to a gunnery sergeant. Anything I can do?
Win Smith, beaming but puzzled, shook his head, and the first sergeant went out singing Bang Away Lulu, far out of tune.
What the hell? He's gonna rape me? I save him and he sits on me. He saves me and I'm Tomps? What the hell?
You're drawing expert pay, ain't you?
Said the corpsman, and then with a wise and twisted smile he added,
It's the nature of the beast, and something else you might call obligation. It's O'Brien's boast that he don't take nothing off nobody.
Well, swab my decks. I never thought of that before, I guess. Would be pretty hard to owe a guy your life.
and he lay back on the cot to marvel, and to drink in the clatter of pans in the galley, the yells from the tents, the tramp of feet, and the strains of Bang Away Lulu, pouring raucously forth from the big mouth of 50-50 O'Brien, the guy who paid his debts.